Well, hi, and here I am again, and this is going to be your lecture for Unit 1. My intention is to, as I mentioned, talk about some of the big ideas underlying the specific uh, facts that you have to learn and so forth. So let's take a look again at the learning objectives, and I'm going to get out of the way for right now. Okay, so one of the big ideas is homeostasis. In your textbook, in Chapter 1, you will see the little introduction about anatomy and physiology, and then there will be diagrams of the organ systems that we have. And I would mention only that the cardiovascular system and the circulatory system are two different things. That is to say that most of the time when we talk about circulatory system, we talk about heart and blood vessels. But the reality is the lymph system is a part of circulation. The muscles are a part of circulation. And the circulatory system is much larger than what we normally think of. And we'll discuss that in greater depth later. Homeostasis is the one big idea that we start with in terms of physiology. Excuse me. And we'll talk about that. And then you'll notice in Chapter 1 the anatomical position, as I mentioned, is standing up with your palms supinated, which means your palms are out, your thumbs are away from your body or pointing away from your body, and that is and we call that supinated, by the way. Let me come back in here a minute. This is, we stand up. Supinated is like this, and I want to put like this, okay, because this is how you could hold a bowl of soup. This is pronated. Your thumbs are towards your body. So with your hands in this position, this is the anatomical position. All right. And you'll notice that you need to learn the body planes. You need to learn, that is sagittal, transverse. Transverse section is like if we cut you in half, like a magician sawing a lady in half or something like that. There's sagittal sections right down the middle like this. I've actually seen a body cut that way for medical purposes, for demonstration. And then there are oblique, surface of oblique cuts, which would be on an angle through the body like this, and transverse cuts like that. Well, I mentioned transverse, sagittal, oblique, and frontal. Frontal, if you were to cut straight down the middle like this, that would be frontal. Okay, so the anatomical language, superior, inferior, medial in the middle, and then medial. Proximal is close to the body, distal is away. Why can't I think of the opposite of medial? Anyway, those are all terms you need to learn, okay? That's just rote memory and just practice. Body surfaces, frontal, mental, brachial, cubital, anti-cubital in the crook of your elbow, and so forth and so on. Pectoral, mammillary, axillary, under your armpit, so forth. And there are surfaces in your back. You know, you sit on your gluteal surface. Many of these surfaces are named for the muscle that they overlay. And there are terms that you're probably familiar with most of the time. There are a few that you're not, like behind the kneecap. The kneecap is the patellar. And you know from the front, you've heard of that before, the patella, the kneecap, right? But behind the kneecap is the popliteal, in the crook of your leg, upper and lower leg, and then your the back of your lower leg is the sural, and the front of your lower leg is the crural. So there are a lot of that. There are a lot of terms there to remember. Okay, so let's go back to the physiology. Physiology is the chemistry. Homeostasis is the consistency of the chemistry of inside of your cells and inside of your tissues and inside of your organs. And I mentioned in the introduction that we should think about body temperature as a part of homeostasis. So chemical reactions occur under certain conditions of temperature, pH, electrolyte concentrations, and in the presence of mixtures of different molecules and ions and so forth. We're going to talk about how those are important to your physiology and your medical health and your well-being and your feeling, how you feel. And that's the big idea with homeostasis that I want to talk about. You should review the anatomy of atoms. Subatomic particles are protons and neutrons in the nucleus of an atom, and the nucleus of an atom is not the same as the nucleus of a cell. Nucleus means center, so that's all that means. Look at mixtures and compounds. You can use the internet and your book for this. And then look at the differences between solutions, colloids, and suspensions. Think of dirty water as a suspension and so forth. And then you can look up on the internet the type of bonds. Ionic bonds are when atoms that have different charges. Actually, an ionic bond is when one atom steals an electron from another so that one of the atoms ends up to be positive and the other negative, like sodium chloride. Ions generally are salts. They're very important to your body, and they dissociate in water, although they're crystalline solids when there's no water, but in water they tend to dissociate into the different ions, which are charged particles. Those ions are extremely important for your well-being. Without them, you would not be able to contract your muscles. You would not be able to send nervous impulses to different parts of your body. You would not literally be able to do any motor functions, nor would you be able to think, because these are extremely important. And those salts act properly and their concentrations are maintained when the pH is correct. And we'll be talking a little bit more about pH and acids and bases as we go. And then you can talk about the differences between organic and inorganic chemicals. In our body, the ions, the salts, are the inorganic chemicals. Sodium, chlorine, calcium, potassium. Those are ions and they're inorganic. Organic compounds are those made of carbon backbones, fats, lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, nucleic acids. Okay? And that's number 12. There's the list of them right there. And then ATP is an organic molecule that is used to transfer energy, to store and release energy. So you get the energy and store it from food, and you release it when you digest food, and you release it when you metabolize ATP in the presence of oxygen. So you know that's a very important molecule, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And when we make it into a diphosphate, by knocking off one of the phosphate groups, we release energy. When we recombine that and put the phosphate group back on, ADP, to form ATP, we then store energy. Okay? And that all happens after digestion. That's what we get from our food. Okay, so let's talk about some basic stuff here. Homeostasis is very important. Your body temperature is what, 98.6? And if it varies much from that, you don't feel well. You don't feel well because the other chemicals inside your cells start to dissociate. Protein starts to denature. And proteins are very important not only structurally to make your muscles and bones and so forth, but proteins are also very important because they are the are enzymes that control the rates of chemical reactions in your body. And proteins denature when the chemical conditions change. Either they get too hot, or if the pH is wrong, or if there's some other problem. So pH, now let's talk about pH. We know that you're probably thinking acids and bases. What is pH? The power of hydrogen. It's the concentration of hydrogen in solution. Your kidneys regulate pH by controlling, excreting or saving hydrogen ions, and by excreting or conserving, saving salts, sodium, calcium, chlorine, and that's regulated by hormones and your kidney function. So that's very important. And the important thing about pH is that pH in your body has to be between 7.35 and 7.45 or you will die. That's a very narrow range when you consider that pH goes from 0 to 14. It is the negative log of the hydrogen ion concentration, which you're not thinking right now because you're thinking, okay, it's a negative log. What does that mean? Well, what it means is, gosh, most people don't even think about it, do they? Just say pH. And most people don't know what pH is. Power of hydrogen. Hydrogen ions in solution are very powerful. When they're very high in solution, we call that an acid, and it can burn and cause serious problems. And hydroxyl ions at the other end of the scale, if they're at high density, then we have something like bleach, and that can burn you too. But in the middle, it's fairly benign, yet chemically very important. 7.35 to 7.45. If your pH gets out of balance, you really get sick. And even just a little bit out of balance in your urine and so forth, and you can have yeast infections, kidney infections. Proper pH is extremely important. Proper pH of the urine is extremely important for washing out invaders that are trying to sneak into your body that way. Okay, so this is very important. What else is important for homeostasis? Okay, temperature and pH and the concentrations of important ions like calcium. Calcium is 200 times more concentrated outside of nerve cells and outside of muscle cells than inside. And when calcium rushes in, things happen like nervous transmission, signals go around your body, there's communication, but calcium has to rush back out and rebalance. Calcium is important in making your muscles contract, and if you get out of balance, like by being dehydrated, what happens? You have cramps, you have muscle cramps, and those muscle cramps can get very serious, and if they get extremely serious, your heart will stop. Very important. So if you have any questions, send me an email or discuss it in discussion board, and I'll try to help you answer it. But these are some things that you need to be thinking about in terms of homeostasis, the consistency of the environment inside of the chemistry of your body, and that's going to be determined by temperature and ion concentrations and pH, which is hydrogen ion concentrations. Okay, we'll see you on the flip side. Thank you.